Hello everyone, I'm Alex Dykes, and today we're out here taking a look at the 2014 Ford Fusion Energi. This is Ford's plug-in mid-sized hybrid sedan. This competes with the likes of the Chevy Volt, in kind of a sort of way, the Prius plug-in hybrid, as well as the Honda Accord plug-in hybrid. In truth, the Honda Accord plug-in hybrid is probably the only direct competition for the Ford Fusion Energi, but because there's so few plug-in vehicles on the market right now, we have to toss that Volt as well as the Prius into this mix. I think the Ford Fusion isn't just the most attractive plug-in available in America, I think it's the most attractive mid-size sedan under about $50,000 in America, and a lot of that has to do with this front end. Ford just did an absolutely excellent job on the design of this Ford Fusion generation. This Aston-Martin-esque grille is very attractive. It has a very bold but also very luxurious look to it all the way around. Everything about this exterior is just really, really gorgeous. I think the Mazda 6 comes in a close second with the Honda Accord a close third, but of course the Honda Accord and the Mazda 6 aren't by default plug-in hybrids, and rather unfortunately for the Accord, the plug-in version of the Accord gets an entirely different front end. I'll post a picture here, as well as a comparison between that and the regular Honda Accord. As a result, I think the Honda Accord plug-in is a little bit less attractive to my eye than some of the other options in this segment. I really wish that there was just that regular Honda Accord front end and Honda Accord grille on that plug-in model. We're testing the SE model, so we don't have HID headlamps, but we still have these attractive projector halogen lamps and attractive fog lamps right here. If you opt for the titanium model with radar cruise control, then we will get an additional radar cruise control module in this grille arrangement. A quick note about this color, because people do ask what color the car is sometimes. This is a very, very dark green color. It actually isn't black, although it probably will appear black in this video just because of the way lighting works. The overall shape of the front is mirrored in the back end of the Fusion, and I think these tail lamps are incredibly attractive as well. They remind me an awful lot of modern Audi products, only I find these more attractive because Ford is using light pipes around these tail lamps rather than individual LEDs, which give the Audis kind of a spotted appearance. Because we're in the Fusion SE, we have a single exhaust tip right down here. We don't get the integrated exhaust tips that you may find in other Fusion products. Backup sensors are an option, but we do have them, and you can also get a backup camera in your Ford Fusion. The Fusion isn't just a pretty face. It does have a very attractive front end, even from the side profile. It's a very blunt nose right there, but it is very attractive from the side as well. And that's mostly due to this very swooping coupe-like profile. The four-door coupe profile is getting incredibly common in the four-door sedan market from a wide variety of mass market as well as luxury manufacturers. The one important thing to keep in mind, however, is that a non-traditional profile like this does reduce rear seat headroom, which we'll go over in a bit, and also reduces trunk access. So those are two areas where the Honda Accord really excels over the Ford Fusion. It's not as sexy on the side profile, but it is a little bit more practical. From this side, the only way you can tell this is a Ford Fusion Energi is because we have different wheels up front and out back, and we have this little Ford Fusion Energi badge right there on the front door. The driver's side of the Fusion Energi is a different matter, however, because this is where you will find the charging port right behind this interesting little twirling door. That's where you plug in your electric vehicle supply equipment. This is basically an over-glorified extension cord. The charger is on board the vehicle. This just tells the car this is what kind of power is available, and this is when you can start charging. So you just plug it in right there. If you use a home charger like this that comes with the car, you're going to take about 6.5 to 7 hours or so to charge the battery fully inside the Fusion Energi. If you have access to a 240 volt charger, either a built-in one or somewhere out at a charging station, then it'll take about half of that to charge the car. Although combination locks for your car aren't really a new thing, Ford's been doing them for some time, the Fusion takes things to a nice new level with touch-sensitive buttons. As you can see now, the buttons appear right there on the door, and I just have to enter the car's code, which can be changed in order to unlock the car. So now that's locked, and I can close the door again, and I can just hit those two bottom buttons to lock the car. Under the Fusion Energi's hood, you will find Ford's brand new hybrid drivetrain. This was introduced with this current generation of Ford Fusion, as well as the Ford C-Max. Unlike Toyota and other manufacturers, Ford only creates one version of their hybrid drivetrain system, and it's shared across the board. So every Ford that uses the hybrid drivetrain uses the same basic transaxle and the engine, rather than going for a mixed 4-cylinder and 6-cylinder lineup like Toyota does. Things start out with a 2-liter Atkinson cycle 4-cylinder engine. It produces 141 horsepower and 129 pound-feet of torque by itself. With the electric motors inside the transaxle, it produces 188 system horsepower. In this plug-in version, because we have that bigger battery pack that can give you a little bit more boost, things bump up to 195 horsepower system max, and that's when that battery is fully charged and it's in its charge depletion mode. It's a little bit more oomph than you get out of the regular hybrid, which is stuck at that 188 system horsepower. In the trunk, you'll find a battery pack that's rated at 7.6 kilowatt hours total, Only about 6.5 kilowatt hours of that total is usable, however. The reason they do that is to make sure that the battery lasts a little bit longer. That's been something that hybrids have done for a while, and it's not unique to the Ford Fusion Energi. The Chevy Volt as well as the Prius plug-in do the same thing. That battery is good for between 15 and 20 miles of EV range. It really depends on how you drive, how hot and cold it is outside, etc. Once that battery is depleted, you're going to get 44 miles per gallon in the city, 41 on the highway, and 43 combined according to the EPA. One last word on this hybrid, because a lot of people get this a little bit wrong. This is not a Toyota hybrid drivetrain system. This is a Ford hybrid drivetrain system. A lot of this confusion is because Ford and Toyota were developing their hybrid drivetrain systems at essentially the same time. The Prius came out first, followed by Ford's hybrid later. At that point in time, a lot of lawsuits flew back and forth because the two companies had been developing their drivetrain systems separately at the same time. However, Toyota beat Ford to the punch with certain patents, Ford beat Toyota to the punch with certain patents, and what ended up happening was a cross-licensing agreement where Ford licensed certain hybrid patents in exchange for certain emissions-related patents and a few other patents from their patent portfolio. So this is not a hybrid drivetrain system manufactured by Toyota. It is a Ford hybrid drivetrain system, and it shares no parts with the Prius or any other Toyota product. The next thing to know is about that Chevy Volt, because the Chevy Volt and the Ford Fusion and all of Toyota's hybrids use essentially the same technology. They use a planetary gear set style hybrid power split device. If you want to know more about that, we'll have a video at some point on hybrid systems. All you really need to know is that that system is essentially very similar to these. There are a few key differences about that Chevy system, mostly designed around making it operate as a serial hybrid, and that's where the gasoline engine generates electricity and then sends the electricity over to a motor to drive the wheels. That can happen in this hybrid drivetrain system. However, usually this system is shuttling power both electronically and mechanically from the engine to the wheels because that's most efficient. Front seat comfort in the Fusion is excellent. I rank this slightly below the Honda Accord in terms of front seat comfort, but that's just me and how I fit into a seat. You should always spend a decent amount of time in a car before you buy, because what's comfortable for me may not be comfortable for you, because we're all built just a little bit differently. Over here we have a 2-way power adjustable lumbar support and a 10-way power driver's seat that is standard in the SE model, as is this 3-position memory on the door there. We also have a tilt telescoping steering column with a decent range of motion. The rear seats are unfortunately where you have to pay the toll for having a sexy side profile like the Fusion does. This 4-door coupe styling, which is also found on something like a Volkswagen CC, is very, very attractive. However, it does cut in on rear headroom. I'm 6 feet tall, and if I sit back in my seat in an upright fashion, then my head is touching the ceiling right there in the back. If I move over to the middle seat, it's a little bit more pronounced because this middle seat is a little bit higher off the ground. I do have to cock my head to one side in order to fit back here. Moving over all the way, this front seat is all the way back in its tracks at a 6'5" passenger there. I do have a little bit of legroom left there, and that's because the Ford Fusion has a decent amount of legroom. It's just a little bit limited on the rear headroom. We do have a folding center armrest right here with 2 cup holders, and these rear seats do fold almost all the way flat with the back, but most importantly, we have a cargo pass-through right here that you won't find in the Honda Accord plug-in or indeed most other hybrids. Let's take a closer look at that cargo pass-through. If I flip down this 60 portion of the 60/40 folding seat, you can see that we have this slot. And if I crawl over here and fold down the 40 portion of the seat, you can see that that slot goes all the way across, and you can see right there in the trunk that little child release handle. These are the cooling ducts for the battery pack. The air intake for that battery pack is right back here. This is not a subwoofer grill, that's the air intake grill for that battery pack cooling system. This means that there is a decent amount of trunk pass-through room, something you don't find in the other competitors. Over here we have the battery disconnect area, so if you're in an accident or for any reason you need to disconnect the high voltage battery, that's where you do it, right over there. Let's take a quick look around the Fusion's interior. We have height adjustable seat belts for the driver and the front passenger. We also have these 4-way adjustable headrests. They ratchet into position like that. So you can see these seats are very European in design. They remind me a great deal of Audi and Volkswagen, which is a very good thing. That's because, of course, the Ford Fusion is also sold as the Ford Mondeo in Europe. Move over to the doors, we can see that we have a lot of soft touch plastics, very attractive styling there, and fit and finish quality, again, that's very European. If we take a look closer here at the fake wood trim as well as the fit and finish right there on those door lock buttons, you can see that everything is a very high quality in the car. This isn't real wood, this is fake wood in all Ford Fusion models. Moving over to the dashboard, that simple and elegant design theme continues. We have a soft touch dashboard and hard touch plastics lower in the dashboard like this glove box. Open the glove box. We have a fairly large compartment. As you can see, we can store a tablet computer in there very easily. Plenty of room down there. And we have this little divider right in the middle. This is not removable. This is a fixed divider. Moving over to the center console, we have our large 8-inch infotainment screen. If you want to know more about that, then click that infotainment link at the bottom of your screen. Styling continues right on the dashboard. We have soft touch dashboard right over here on the driver's side. And if we move down, we have soft touch plastics on either side of this interesting storage cubby. So you can stick your hand right behind there in the dashboard. It's 2 storage cubbies with a removable liner right there. Touch buttons for our climate control as well as our infotainment system. We have a traditional looking shifter right here on the dash. Electronic parking brake, EV button, fuel door release. If we had automatic parking, there would be another button there for the self-parking system. If you want to know more about that self-parking system, just click that link down below at the bottom of the video and be taken over to that video. Since this is an American car, it's no surprise that we have 2 very large cup holders that we're easily able to accommodate the largest sodas we could throw at them. And if we open up the center console, we have a very large center console here. 2 USB ports for the infotainment system. The SD card slot, you can use that for music or for maps. We have our AV inputs. We have 12-volt power outlet right there. We have a fairly deep storage cubby with a little pen holder and another little change holder right there. There's also another cargo divider to help you store additional items in that center console. Over on the driver's side, we have a large central speedometer flanked by 2 4.2-inch LCDs. They display anything from infotainment to phone system information to additional gauge information as well. If you want to know more about that, we have a lot of information in the infotainment video. You can click on over there as well. If we zoom out of that, we have the typical Ford steering wheel. This is used in a decent number of different Ford models. Very attractive, nice sport grips right there. Full leather on the steering wheel. This is going to be a little bit more durable than something you'll find in like a Honda Accord, which uses split leather. Split leather is softer than full grain leather, but it's not as durable. So it is a little bit more luxurious feeling, but it won't wear as long. These 4-way with OK button clusters right here on the steering wheel control the respective LCD in that instrument cluster. Over here we have our voice command button, mute button, volume up, down, track forward, backward, hang up buttons, etc. And then over here we have our cruise control buttons. Over here to the driver's left side, we really see Ford's attention to detail in the way these buttons and trim panels line up. Again, I really credit this to Ford selling this in Europe as the European Ford Mondeo. This is definitely up to the standard that Volkswagen and Audi were pushing a number of years ago. The battery pack in the Fusion has to go somewhere, and that somewhere is, of course, the trunk, just like every other hybrid out there on the market. And it does eat into the cargo area by a decent amount. This is the largest roller bag you can carry on a domestic flight. It is a little bit tricky to fit more than one of these in the back of the Ford Fusion Energi, because if we pull this out, you'll see this is the battery right here. It is a fairly large battery pack, but if you look behind this fabric, it's actually mostly a safety partition. So there's a definite safety aspect going on here. There's a decent amount of crash structure going on there to protect the battery. Right under this little hatch, you won't find a spare tire. You will find a storage compartment for that charging cable. And then over here we have a can of Fix-A-Flat and an inflator for flat tires. If you do have a severe tire damage, then you are going to have to call a tow truck. Same with any hybrid these days. Right here behind this little partition, you will find the 12-volt battery for the car. It is a very small battery because, of course, this large battery right here is providing most of the power for the car. The 12-volt battery is still needed, and it's just used as a ballast, basically, for the 12-volt system in the car. Over here, you'll notice that Ford hasn't used hidden hinges, but what they have done is they have put the hinges behind this partition in the car. So if it fits in the trunk, you can close the trunk rather than having this space accessible to the user and then having these bars bop your cargo right on the head. It is a very tight fit, so we'll give the Ford Fusion Energi a 3 out of 10 in our exclusive Trunk Comfort Index because I wasn't able to close this trunk lid on myself. Let's talk about batteries first. The Ford Fusion is in the middle ground in this plug-in hybrid segment. The Toyota Prius plug-in has about a 4 kilowatt-hour battery or so. This is approximately 6.5 usable kilowatt-hours, and the Chevy Volt is at the top end of the segment with approximately 12 or so kilowatt-hours of usable battery capacity. That means that the range in the Ford Fusion Energi as well as the C-Max Energi is somewhat in between the Prius as well as the Chevy Volt when you're operating electric only. This is good for between 15 and 20 miles electric only depending on how you drive it and how hot it is outside. That's really an important thing to keep in mind because the Ford Fusion Energi and the C-Max as well as the Accord plug-in and most of these other plug-in vehicles like the Cadillac ELR, which is coming out soon, all use a resistive heater element to heat the cabin when the engine is not running. This is an important consideration because a lot of people tend to think of hybrid cars in regular gasoline car terms. A regular gasoline car heats the cabin with waste energy from the engine, so it doesn't really, in theory, cost anything to heat that cabin. However, a plug-in hybrid that operates like an EV, if you don't want the engine to turn on right away, needs the engine to run in order to heat the cabin, or it has to use an electric resistive heating element to heat the cabin. That means that heating the cabin in EV mode actually consumes more power than cooling the cabin in the summer. So your cold winter days are going to shorten your range far more than a hot summer day in a plug-in hybrid or in an EV. This partially explains why the last time I had a Chevy Volt EV, I got much lower range figures than an awful lot of my viewers out there are getting in their Volt EV. That's just because I had it in a particularly cold week here in Northern California. It did need to spend an awful lot of time heating the cabin. Something like a Toyota Prius will turn on the engine to heat the cabin, but the Ford Energi will only do that if it's very cold outside and you're in auto mode or in preserve your battery EV till later mode. If you're in EV only mode, this vehicle will stay in EV only mode regardless of how hard you press the accelerator pedal or how much heat you need in the cabin. Now let's talk about the drivetrain technology because that's kind of related here. The Prius, the Ford plug-in hybrids, as well as the Chevy Volt all operate with the same basic hybrid technology. It's a planetary gear set style mechanical and electrical power splitting device under the hood. The difference between the Volt and this hybrid is that there's an additional clutch pack inside that transaxle unit that can lock a portion of the hybrid drivetrain to force it into true serial hybrid mode for a decent range of driving situations. Mostly that's for the EV mode because once you opt into the hybrid mode, it does spend an awful lot of time in parallel hybrid mode, which is just more efficient. Don't think that's a bad thing about the Chevy Volt. It actually is a good thing because parallel hybrid mode is more efficient than most serial hybrid modes. Again, that really depends on your terrain, but the vast majority of the time a parallel hybrid mode is going to be more efficient. That's why they do it. That's why Toyota and Ford do it as well. So that's actually a good thing for the Chevy Volt. The Accord, on the other hand, doesn't use those same patents, so it has to operate in a true serial hybrid mode below 42 miles an hour, which does result in reduced efficiency in those lower speed ranges. Because the Ford Fusion can operate as a pure EV, we have two different performance numbers to talk about. If we're operating in EV-only mode, this vehicle goes from 0 to 60 in about 14.4 seconds, which is a lot slower than a Chevy Volt, but faster than you can do in a Prius plug-in. If you engage the engine, we're around 7.1 seconds 0 to 60, which is at the faster end of the spectrum, just about as fast as that Accord plug-in. That 0 to 60 time, you might notice, is just about the same as the regular Ford Fusion hybrid, even though this hybrid Energi is a little bit heavier. That's all down to the fact that this actually delivers more horsepower if that battery is fully charged than the regular hybrid. So the regular hybrid is only 188 system horsepower. This bumps it up to 195 system horsepower, but only if that hybrid battery is completely charged, via the electrical outlet. So once you run out of that hybrid battery and the system reverts over to standard gasoline electric hybrid mode, then you're back down to 188 total system horsepower. That gives this a distinct advantage over the Chevy Volt, which is notably slower out on the road in terms of acceleration. It's about the same as the Honda Accord plug-in, however. When it comes to driving dynamics, there's no arguing. The Ford Fusion Energi as well as the Ford Fusion Hybrid are obviously the handling choices in this segment. The chassis is very well designed. It responds incredibly well. Even though we have electric power steering, there's just a hint of steering feel. Everything feels very connected in this cabin. The Honda Accord plug-in is a very close second, but it is still second in this category. The Chevy Volt is down there with the plug-in Prius. Braking feel, as well as the transition from regenerative braking to friction braking in the Ford Fusion Energi is very good, but it's not quite as good as the brand new Honda Accord Hybrid. This vehicle also doesn't do the same trick as the Accord Hybrid and Accord plug-in hybrid can do, where you're going downhill and you fill up your battery completely. This one will engage the friction brakes, where the Honda Accord will still use regenerative braking. It will just spend that energy that it's creating going downhill by spinning the engine. So instead of involving the friction brakes at that point, it gives you a very linear feel to the brakes. It's kind of an interesting trick that Honda did there. That's not really happening here in the Ford Fusion Energi, but it doesn't happen in the Volt or the Prius either. The suspension in all of the Fusions is tuned towards the firmer European side of the equation, but that's actually quite similar to the Honda Accord plug-in hybrid as well. Although this is still a little bit firmer than the Accord plug-in, this is definitely my preference in this segment. Before I dive right into the fuel economy, we need to know that fuel economy is just a really sticky wicket. Especially with a hybrid like this, as well as a plug-in, it really depends on how often you plug in your hybrid, how long your trips are, and how you drive the car. please keep in mind that the driver is the biggest factor when it comes to fuel economy. We've been averaging about 50 to 60 miles per gallon in this plug-in, and that's a huge range, but that's because it depends on how often I've been able to plug in this Ford Fusion Energi. Now, if I plug it in on my way to the office, it's about a 50-mile journey. It spends the first 15 or so miles in EV mode. I go up and over a 2,200-foot mountain pass, and this vehicle recharges an awful lot of energy going down the hill, so I average that trip at around 60 to 65 miles per gallon. If I don't charge the vehicle on my way to work, then I get about 43 miles per gallon or so. On the way home, I get a little bit less. It's right around 40. One thing to keep in mind is that this vehicle for me and my driving style and my commute is actually getting better fuel economy than the regular Ford Fusion hybrid. The reason for that is that my commute involves an awful lot of hill climbing and hill descending, and the larger battery in the Energi model of the Ford Fusion is able to recapture that energy back into the battery and then use it later, whereas the regular Ford Fusion hybrid would just fill its battery pack and then I wouldn't be able to regenerate the rest of my downhill trip. Overall, on my commute, I got better fuel economy in this than a Chevy Volt, but it wasn't quite as good as the Honda Accord plug-in. The Prius plug-in comparison is a little bit tricky because the Prius is kind of a different vehicle. Toyota was not trying to create an EV mode that spent an awful lot of time in EV, because if you accelerate quickly in that Prius, or if you go over about 62 miles an hour or so, which is pretty much any freeway driving in the US, then it has to involve the gasoline engine. Their real goal there was just to improve your fuel economy for, the first 15 or so miles in the Prius plug-in, and it definitely does that. Especially if you're in longer commutes, the Prius plug-in is going to be the more efficient vehicle. I averaged about 65 to 75 miles per gallon in that Prius plug-in on my one-way commute, which is a decent bump over this Ford Fusion Energi, even though the gasoline engine in that Prius turns on basically right away in my commute. I have to start going uphill right away, turns on right away, and the only time it really spent off was going downhill. That's very telling because even though this car was going about 20 miles in EV-only range, and that car was only going about 9 miles or so in EV-only range, it still got better fuel economy in the end, because once the battery is depleted in that Prius, it gets fuel economy that's roughly similar to a regular Prius, right around 50 miles per gallon or so, where this one drops down to about 40 or so. Still, according to ABC News polls, the average American commutes about 6 miles each way to work, so the vast majority of these vehicles should accommodate the vast majority of drivers. While we're stuck behind this truck, let's talk driving gadgets. The Ford Fusion and the Ford Fusion Energi easily have the widest variety of gadgets and gizmos to help you drive better. We have lane departure warning, lane departure prevention that'll actually steer you back in the lane. We have radar cruise control, pre-collision warning. We also have parallel parking assistant, which will literally parallel park this car for you. Easily the tops in the segment. Although other vehicles around do offer radar cruise control like the Prius, as well as that Honda Accord plug-in hybrid, the radar cruise control going on in this Ford Fusion Energi is easily the best in the segment. The Honda Accords doesn't feel very natural driving out there on the road, but this one feels very natural and very easy to use. Pricing for the Ford Fusion Energi starts at $34,700 for the SE model like we're testing right here, and that does give you the leather upholstery as standard. Titanium model adds a few extra features. It's $36,500 starting. If you fully load your Ford Fusion Energi up, you'll end up at around $43,000 or so. Our model here is lightly equipped at $40,000. Compared to the regular Ford Fusion, a regular Ford Fusion gasoline-only SE is $23,935, so it is a decent jump up from that. And a regular old SE hybrid is $27,280, so that's still a decent jump even over that model. In comparison, a Chevy Volt is only slightly cheaper. It's $34,185. A Honda Accord hybrid is a bit more expensive starting, but does have more standard features at $39,780. And the Toyota Prius plug-in is the cheapest plug-in you can get at the moment. It's $29,990. All those prices I mentioned are before tax credits. Be sure to check with a tax professional about your tax situation before you depend on one. Tax credits are based on battery size, and that is a very important thing to keep in mind. So the Chevy Volt with the biggest battery gets the biggest tax credit. The Prius plug-in with the smallest battery gets the smallest tax credit, and the Ford Fusion is somewhere in the middle. If you want to know more about pricing, please visit my friends at TrueDelta.com. I'll post a little link down below so you can go and check out that website. They have great pricing comparison tools as well as building tools if you want to know the invoice price on cars or how features price out with one another. Overall, the Ford Fusion Energi is an excellent plug-in hybrid, and I would certainly buy this before I bought a Prius or a Chevy Volt. When it comes to the Honda Accord hybrid, however, I'm very, very torn. The Accord hybrid fits me a little bit better than this vehicle, mostly because of the rear seat legroom and the fact that I found the interior just a little bit more comfortable for me and a little bit more to my tastes. However, this is an absolutely gorgeous plug-in hybrid. It's an absolutely gorgeous family sedan in any configuration, and it's a very tough deal to beat. I think that I would personally buy the Honda Accord plug-in hybrid, but for most of my friends, I would recommend the Ford Fusion Energi. Without a doubt, one of the big reasons for buying a plug-in hybrid, especially in California, is to be able to use that carpool lane solo. You want to check with your state laws to see whether that applies to you in other states other than California. But a number of other states allow solo drivers with plug-in hybrids to ride by themselves in that carpool lane. On my approximately 50-mile-an-hour commute each way, that saved me about 35 to 40 minutes a day. How much is that time worth to you is really the question you need to ask, because I don't think you'll ever save money with a plug-in hybrid. Fuel economy just isn't that good. With our electric rates, the cost of acquisition, the lifetime of vehicle, everything factored in, I don't think you'll really ever save money on a plug-in hybrid versus the regular hybrid, or especially versus that base Ford Fusion SE. It is, however, an excellent vehicle. If you like being green, then this is the car for you. If you just want to reduce your carbon footprint, again, this is the car for you. Or if you want to ride in that carpool lane all by yourself, this is definitely a car for you. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been the 2014 Ford Fusion Energi plug-in hybrid. Go ahead and comment on this video. Tell me what you liked and what you didn't like. Hit the subscribe button so you can be updated on all of our latest videos. You can also send me your questions and emails to alex@alexonautos.com. There will be a little link down there in the comment section down below, so you'll know how to do that. You can find me on facebook.com/alexonautos, and we'll see you next week.